Hello, I'm the Postman. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a wire suspension and steering. This is what I'm going to be making today. I made this earlier just as an example to show you what exactly it does. This is independent suspension, and there are a few different types of suspension, but I mainly just build this type because it's reliable and I like the way it works. So, if I can get it, okay. I'll provide a basic propulsion E2. That wheel on the back is the E2, and it's simply ball socketed to the tires, letting them spin to the same angles it's spinning. This E2 has forward, reverse, and a turbo, as well as brakes. This is what we'll be making, and really you should use your own propulsion system, but if you just need something to get you off the ground, this will work for you. I'll provide links for everything you need in the description, including tools, the map, and various things that I'll be using. So, without further ado, let's get started. Just leave this over there. Okay. Let's start by spawning this prop. In PHX, it is a 05 by 3 by 025. I mainly count by the actual PHX blocks, but you can do it however you want. We're going to need this as our base prop. So, this little wheel here that I'm using is called GB Radial, and it's what I'll be using to access pretty much all the tools that I need for this tutorial. Links to get it in the description if you want it. Okay, so we're going to need Smart Snap. If you don't know what that is, there's also a link in the description for it. It is a really useful tool that puts a grid on everything and allows you to snap your cursor to various points, allowing you to make precision movements, welds, axes, and everything else. So the settings I'm using for it are default, except I have enable for all entities checked, and I have the minimum distance between each snap point, or the last slider, set to 5.86. That's very important, because if we don't have the same grid size, then all of the movements I make and all the movements you make will be different, and we want them to be the same so that we're on the same page and we do the same things. So, set it to 5.86 and check if your grid looks just about this. There should be a plus sign in the middle of each PHX block, and you know you're doing it right. So, our car needs to be facing, or our chassis needs to be facing north to south. How can you tell north to south? Well, put your spray down. Mine is invisible because I'm playing on single player and it doesn't show up. But the top of your spray faces north, and from previous experience, I know that this is north. So the front of my car, which is this, will be facing north. Now, you need to Shift E everything in this tutorial. Every prop, everything you use, you need to Shift E it. That snaps it to 45-degree angles. And you want to make sure that it is snapped correctly, like this. And off the ground some distance because we want to be able to work under it. Okay, now, just spawn a random prop, considerable size such as this, doesn't really matter. And go to your Lua wheels, which are in the Wire tab under Wire Custom on the very bottom, labeled as Wheel. I will include links for these in the description. So the reason we have this prop is because if you spawn Lua wheels on the ground, they weld to the ground, or the axis to the ground. So we want to spawn them on a prop and freeze them, and then we want to remove the prop. And by the way, all the settings for the Lua wheels are default, because the normal Half-Life 2 tire has a bad hitbox. If you try and drive a car on it, it'll bounce, bump, and maybe even go through the ground. But the hitbox on Lua wheels and props that you use make spherical on are spheres. So they roll around like spheres, like this. And that's what we want. Now that we have all these tires lined up, we want to make sure that the Smart Snap grid is parallel and perpendicular to the ground. Just for consistency's sake, we want to make sure that everything is lined up and neat and perfect. We want to get easy precision and select move first prop to second. Set your nudge amount to 10, and the nudge is percent of width prop unchecked. I'm going to be using units of 10 for all of this, so if I say nudge it twice, I mean nudge it 20 units. So select the middle of your Lua wheels using Smart Snap and place them 2 blocks in from the end of your chassis, or base prop, whatever, and at the bottom, so right here. Okay, so nudge these tires out from the vehicle, 2 nudges, or 20 units. And as a note, which I should have mentioned earlier, you want to set the weight of all of the props we're spawning to 50,000. The reason for this is when you make constraints to props, the more weight they have, the stronger the constraints are when you duplicate it. We're going to be setting the weights back to normal when we're finished building this and finished with all the constraints. If I forget to mention to set it to 50,000, do it anyways. Excluding wire chips, you leave them whatever weight they spawn as. You don't need to change their weight. So we want to move the base prop up. You want to nudge this plate so it's at least above the tires. Let's see. This would work. It is above the tires, but it won't be that good of a suspension. It's not very tall, it doesn't have much wiggle room for the tires, etc. Okay, now we need a suspension plate. You want this to be as long as your car. So my car is 3 PHX units long, and if you can help it, as wide as your tires. Notice how this is less wide. That will just make the vehicle less stable, but the next option up is too wide. This is wider than I want. Well, I could use this, but you know, I'm going to stick with this one. So we're going to move this prop to the center of the body, and let's not forget to set it to 50,000. Now that it's in the center, we want to nudge it up 2 units. If you do more, then your suspension, the elastics that stretch from the tire to the suspension plate will be longer, and they will just be more of a pain to deal with. So for this tutorial, I'm going to move it up about 2 units. And if the suspension plate is too low, then your suspension is not really going to do you very much good. It's not going to work that well. So 2 units. Now we're going to weld the suspension plate to the body. Now we need to get the rope tool. Make sure the add length is 0, force limit is 0, rope width is whatever you like. I'm going to set it to 1. And make sure that rigid is checked. That is very important. I've made a number of suspensions without using that, and then at the end, notice that my suspension was completely broken. So, you want to click in the middle of the tire, and then you want to click across to the other side of the chassis, like this. Now, if you really want, you could do it to here. That would work as well, to the corner, but in this suspension, I'm going to do it straight across. And then you want a second rope to the diagonal tire, like so. I'm just using the position where I originally placed the tire to place the rope. So you need 2 ropes per tire. So go ahead and do this for all 4 tires. Now that we have those ropes all set, and we made sure that they were rigid. So next we're going to do the elastics. With the elastics, you want the constant for my settings to be 50,000, 1,000 damping, and 1,000 relative damping. Stretch only unchecked, another very important part. If you have stretch only checked, it will act as a spring instead of as a 2-directional elastic. So these settings, the constant, you can do it 40,000 to 60,000. I'm keeping it in the middle of 50,000. The damping you can do about 700 at very minimum to about 1,500. Same with the relative damping, keep them pretty much the same. Of course you can use your own elastic settings if you want, but these are the ones that I use. So you want to put them from the center of your tire straight up onto your suspension plate. You can see it here in red. That's what you want the elastics to be like. Now I'm going to reapply them with the width 0. Go ahead and do the same. You can keep them 1 if you want to keep track of where they are, but okay, now our car should bounce if we set the weights back to normal. Now we need to move on to a steering plate because we want the front wheels to turn. So go ahead and go to your useful and explosive props and find a 1x5. 1 block wide, 5 blocks long. You can do different lengths if you wish, but the shorter it is, the less strength your steering will have. And I noticed 5 is just about right for this chassis. Set the weight to 50,000. Oops, not 50. 50,000. And then easy precision, move it to the center of your vehicle. You could put it in the front or the back if you wish, but it'll just make the vehicle unbalanced because of the weight distribution. To get our axis center tool, we're going to click on the top of this and then on our body. This allows it to spin like so. So, now we need to move on to ball sockets. This is the important part where you need to be facing north and south. If you're not, then things will just not work correctly. So we're going to be modifying a setting called the slave socket, as someone else coined quite a while ago. I don't remember. But X minimum is negative 0.1, X maximum 0.1, Y minimum negative 0.1, Y maximum 0.1, Z minimum negative 0.1, Z maximum 0.1. Last two boxes checked, and the rest of the settings are 0. This is the slave socket, and we'll do the following two props. If you apply it to two props, they will mimic each other's angles. That's why I call it the slave socket. We're going to be modifying this slave socket and then applying it to various parts of our vehicle. So we're going to set X minimum to negative 180 and then X maximum to 180. That allows the X axis, which is the axis on which the tires will spin relative to the base. It allows it to spin freely. We want to apply this from the back tires to the base. Okay, now we want to get the slave socket with the same settings and set it from the front tires. It doesn't matter where you click on here, by the way. For the steering prop. And now, if we test it, we should have steering. Ta-da! But here's the problem. The tires spin all the way around, and cars don't do that. Pretty sure. So we need to restrict the angles of the steering prop. Now we set it back to the default slave socket. Now that we're back at the negative 0.1, 0.1 for all settings, we want to set the Z minimum to negative 35 and the Z maximum to 35. We're going to apply it from the steering prop to the base. Now, if we test again, unfreeze the front tires and turn this, it only turns as far as 35 degrees in either direction. So now our vehicle rolls. Sort of rolls. You want to go back to your elastic tool and set the constant to 10,000 and both the dampings to 1,000. And apply this from the corner of your suspension or your steering plate backwards and in the center. So let me set the width to 1. There will be 2 elastics from the corner of the steering plate to the center. This allows the steering plate to snap back to the middle position when you let go of either A or D. Let's put a seat on the thing. Just get a seat, get the no collide tool, no collide it with the base. Actually, you can just no collide or right click no collide to no collide it with anything or everything, just because it doesn't need to collide with anything. Okay, and now that we have no collide out, right click the suspension plate once and the steering plate once. Now they are no collided with everything and should not cause you any problem. Now the tires, you want to no collide with each other and with the base. And test. Okay. While this does look a little weird, everything is performing as it should, and once we set the weights to normal, this will not happen. Okay, on to the wire portion. Go to your wire tab, select wire hydraulic, uncheck fixed, and set width to 0. Now click in the same place as you did your elastics, from the edge of the suspension plate to 2.5 blocks inward. Now that hydraulic is created, we want to place the controller on the right side because that's the right hydraulic. Do the same for the left hydraulic, the one that makes the vehicle turn right. Now we need an advanced pod control placed on the side. Now that we have that all set up, all we need to do is control the length of these hydraulics and we'll be golden. So I've created an E2 for the purpose of doing this. It is in the description. It's a really simple one. Basically, you press D. When you press D, the left hydraulic gets longer, and when you press A, the right hydraulic gets longer. Pretty simple. Wire A to the pod, D to the pod, wire the left hydraulic to the E2 as left, and the right hydraulic to the E2 as right. Now that that's all hooked up, we should have steering. All we have left to do now is provide propulsion and do the weights. Let's put the propulsion E2 on there. So it's a sort of basic engine chip, which I have commented slightly. A link for this is in the description, and feel free to use it, replicate it, whatever. Now we're going to right click no collide on this engine because it doesn't need to collide with anything. And then we're just going to place it in the back or the center or somewhere on our car, but make sure that it's centered left and right. Now you want to use axis center. Now we need to get our ball socket advanced. Go to slave socket, the default one with all the negative 0.1s and 0.1s. Apply it from the propulsion to the back wheels. Now, if you want your front wheels to spin and your car to be four-wheel drive, use this here setting. Negative 0.1x minimum, 0.1x maximum, negative 180y minimum, 180y maximum, negative 180z minimum, 180z maximum. Apply that from your propulsion to your front wheels, and then wire the wire link on the propulsion to the advanced pod. Now, we need to set the weights. So, here's what I do for the weights. I set the base prop to about 800. You can set it from 800 to 1000. It really just depends on your preference and what you want the weights to be. The tires need to be about a quarter of the body weight, which would be 200, but we're going to do a little bit more and make them 225 for all four wheels. And we want the steering prop to be more than the tires, but not too much, so it doesn't weigh the vehicle down. We're going to do 300 for the steering. And then this is another really important part. You want the suspension plate to be at least 200 in weight. If it's any less, your car will spaz and fly across the map and everything will be lost. So that is pretty much it. Backing up. Wheels are a little spazzy, but that's probably just because I did something a little bit off. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope that you learned something, and then maybe sometime you'll be able to change this knowledge and make it work for some other contraption you're using. I hope that this at least gave you a little bit more knowledge. So, thanks for watching, and goodbye.